Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be making an enclosure for two different species, the giant bugs of the Carboniferous period. And if you enjoy extinct animals as much as we do, please subscribe to the channel. So, the two different species that we are going to be making an enclosure for today are the giant centipede, the flora, and the giant dragonfly, the Meganeuropsis. So here, these animals are not actually in the game yet, but we do have these beautiful statues. And here what I've done is I've just made them downsized a little bit, because over here you can see that we actually have them. This is how they look, the statues, when you first get them. They're absolutely massive. So I've just brought them down size a bit to the actual size they would have been, and you can see they are still pretty big. So without further ado, let's get down to the business of making their enclosure. Let's begin. So the first thing you want to do when building an enclosure for bugs or creepy crawlies is you want to make sure everything is enclosed. So I'm going to use this lovely dome that's already in the game, ready to use, but what I'm going to do is it's getting in the way a little bit, so I've moved it out of the way, but when I put it down I pressed the ground down to make a nice silhouette of the shape of the dome. So now I can put that to the side and start building what I'm going to have inside the exhibit. And I'm starting off with putting in this lovely boardwalk, this lovely platform that's going to keep the guests so they don't have to trod through the swamp below. And we're going for a swamp habitat because back in the Carboniferous period it was very well known that there was a lot of swamps back in this time. So that's the kind of environment we're going for, the perfect habitat for the giant dragonflies. Brilliant habitat for them to lay their eggs in the water where their larvae can feed and grow. So yeah, that's what the kind of habitat we're going for here. What we're going to do is we're going to have two separate enclosures. So we're going to have one for the dragonflies, which is going to be this one, and then we'll do the centipede in the other side. So there'll be a little section where they can walk through and get to that. So what I'm doing here now is just putting in the vegetation, and I was looking for the kind of things that used to grow in this time period, because the trees were very different. They were in fact ferns, a lot of them, really oversized massive ferns. So I just typed in ferns and then started making the ferns really large and putting those in there rather than just getting swamp trees. I think I do use a few swamp trees, but mainly ferns because I want to try and go for the theme for the Carboniferous period. And putting a few lilies in there now, and a few other nice decorational plants to really give it that swamp feel. Oh, and here what I'm going to do, this is going to be the entrance to the flora. What I thought is a lot of bugs, they tend to live in caves and cave systems and things like that. So what I wanted to do was have this boardwalk go round, and then you go through a cave entrance, and that is where you're going to go and see the enclosure for the flora, the giant centipede. So, and what we'll do with this one, the guests can walk around, and they're actually in the enclosure with the dragonflies, because I don't think the dragonflies pose much of a threat, whereas the flora, I don't know, I remember in Prehistoric Park they did say that it was a vegetarian, but I wouldn't want to risk it with the guests, not with those pincers. They could give a nasty bite. So yeah, I don't think we're not gonna risk that. There we go, put in a swamp tree there. And the main thing is afterwards when you put the dome over, it's finding
how tall the trees are if they fit, so you have to squash them down a little bit. So we're going to put in a nice little dead tree here for them to land on and just chill out. And also some horsetails. This was one of the most common plants that lived in this time period as well. I was looking at what there were. So there were ferns, horsetails, and I think it was cycads, which are basically evolved, I believe, from ferns, but they weren't in the game, so I had to just go for some decorational plants and different plants that look similar to cycads or look similar to the kind of plants that would live in this kind of this period in time. But yeah, I'm liking the way it's looking. It's looking very prehistoric. Looks like the kind of habitat that would suit these giant bugs. Yeah, it's looking very good. We'll just put some vines here on the entrance to the cave for the flora, just make it look a bit more overgrown and blend in a bit more. Lovely. So yeah, it's coming on. I'm liking the way it's looking. And what I'm going to do now is just on these rocks put a few plants in to make it blend in a bit better. This time period really was an explosion of plants. This is just when the plants are starting to take over on the land. So we really have to make those plants, explode and go all over the place. Now what happened here was the windows on the dome, I deleted them all, so I've saved you the trouble there and just fast forwarded. The reason I deleted them all is because it was very dark inside the dome, very, very dark, that the windows cause a shadow, and I thought it looks too dull, and it didn't look very nice and bright and vibrant, so I've deleted all the windows. We can just pretend that there still is windows in there, obviously, but yeah, it looks a lot better now. You can actually see some light shining through, and it just looks a bit more, it just looks nicer. So we'll just have to pretend that the bugs can't get out. Yeah, and just put those posts in now. I'm going to put the railings on now so that no one falls off into the swamp. We wouldn't want that because, well, we could actually put some other creatures in this habitat, because back in this time period, there were a lot of amphibians roaming about. So we had giant bugs flying around, creeping around, and in the swamps there were huge amphibians, giant salamander creatures and frogs and things like that. It really was a weird time, and some of these amphibians they could grow pretty large, and we wouldn't want the guests falling off into there if we did decide to put one of these living in the swamp. So yes, we'll just put some railings around to keep them safe. Lovely. So let's get some facts about this giant dragonfly. The Meganeuropsis is its scientific name. So this creature is the largest insect to ever fly. Its wingspan was 28 inches or 71 centimeters, so that is pretty big when you think this is an insect. It's very large. So what I did for this is I actually got the tape measure out, and I thought I want to make sure that I get the size roughly right in the game. So I thought I need to find an object in the game that's similar to an object in real life. So I thought, I'll just use a door. So luckily enough, it is pretty much just a little bit under the width of a door. So I thought I can just get a door off the game and then bring the dragonfly down in size, because it's massive in the game, the statue, and just bring it down to size so it's just roughly about the same size of the width of a door. So now we have them roughly, well, quite accurate to the size they would have been. And what I've done is I'm going to make them a nice blue colour, because most dragonflies I've seen, they tend to be the green, or there are some damselflies, I think they are, as a blue. But I think if they were green in this type of habitat, I think they'd just be lost because it's already so green. You can see I'm putting a bit of a variety of colour there, a bit of red just to break it up a bit. But yeah, I think they'd just be lost in this green jungle habitat. So I'm going for a nice blue colour. They probably would have actually been green to blend into their environment. It would have been a better colour to be, so you don't stand out. But I want people to be able to see them, so we're going to go for a nice blue colour, and we'll put a nice little few swamp trees there to add a bit of variety to the enclosure. And here I was just trying out one of the redwood trees. I thought it might work, but no, I think we're better off sticking to the swamp trees and the giant ferns. So yeah, that's coming on very good. But these creatures were incredible predators. They had very good vision, and their heads could move individually as well, which is something some bugs don't have. Like when you think of a spider, its head, its eyes are basically on its body. So this creature can move its head or keep its head fixed with its vision on its prey while its body twists and moves. So it can lock onto its target, move into position while still remaining focused on the target, and then strike. Bang. Yes, you wouldn't want to be a smaller bug during the Carboniferous period. This is the thing you would not want to bump into. And here we're going to put in a little waterfall, little water feature. Just something to add there to make the exhibit a bit more interesting, something for the guests to look at as they walk through. Lovely. And I'm just going to put a little one in for this. I'm not going to make a huge one because it is a smaller exhibit. Just a nice tiny waterfall coming through, splashing onto that boulder there, and then cascading off into the water. Might bring a bit of oxygen into the water as well. Well, mind you, we probably don't need much more oxygen here, because back in the Carboniferous period, the oxygen levels were a lot higher than they are today. I think it's about 35% higher than it is today. And that's one of the reasons they believe that these bugs grew absolutely huge. So you think the reason they've gone so high is because all the plants are now starting to take over on the land for the first time. These forests are exploding, they're erupting across the whole of the planet, and the oxygen levels just go through the roof. And these bugs, that I'm sure they absorb them through pores on their body. They're not like like us, where we breathe through our nose and into the lungs. I'm sure they absorb the oxygen through. So that's what's caused them to just grow so big. And the biggest one was the flora, the largest insect, that grew absolutely massive. But yeah, there was an experiment I saw. I can't remember what it was, but there was an experiment where they basically got cockroaches, modern day cockroaches today, and they had one where they just fed it normal oxygen levels that you get today, and of course it stayed the same size as they expected. And there was another one where they fed it more oxygen to what you'd expect in the Carboniferous period, and the cockroach actually did grow bigger. It didn't grow massive to something that you'd expect to see in the Carboniferous, but it did grow a lot larger than the other cockroach. Now you think of millions and millions of years of evolution living in this kind of habitat, the bugs would grow massive over time, and that's exactly what happened. We got these huge dragonflies the size of birds flying around, and then huge centipedes that were growing as big as some crocodiles. So it's just a weird time period. And this is before the dinosaurs. This is before mammals. There may have been some mammals, I'm not sure. Maybe they hadn't. I don't know. I don't think they had evolved yet. But it's weird, isn't it? Everything has its own time. You have the time of the giant bugs. Before that was the time of the giant fish. Then you had the reptiles, which took over. Then it's now it's the mammals era. And you even had the bird era at one point, because you had the huge terror birds, which used to eat horses when they were the size of like cats. So everything has its own heyday, and this was the heyday for the giant bugs and amphibians as well. So here what I'm going to do is just make a little entrance for people to get in, and we'd have to make it we'll have to have 2 doors, so we'll have 2 sets of doors so that the bugs don't fly out and escape into the wild, because it would be absolutely murder to try and catch these creatures if they did escape. Yeah, so we're gonna put that in there now, and it probably also we'd have to make it like we'd have to control the regulations of the oxygen levels inside this dome, because if the oxygen levels do drop, they might struggle to survive. They would need that oxygen very high so that they can support such a large body. So we'd have to have some kind of system to keep the oxygen levels at the right optimum amount, and the humidity as well in here as well, because it was a very humid time then. The earth was a lot warmer, so as soon as the guests walk in here, they're going to feel the oxygen levels change, and they're going to feel the humidity as well as they walk in. It's going to be a very strange kind of environment to come into. I'm just going to put some netting on there as well, but we'll just pretend that is got glass in between them, so the air isn't seeping out. Lovely. So that's a nice little entrance for you to coming into the bug house. We'd probably have to have a sign as well saying no smoking, because if someone did smoke inside here with the oxygen levels being higher, the last thing we want is a fire, because the oxygen is the fuel for the fire, and this thing would just burn like crazy. And back then it's believed that there would have been a lot of fires, even though it's a swampy habitat. That oxygen, even the damp stuff, might just erupt up in flames. So if there was ever a thunderstorm in those humid, well, there probably would have been a lot of thunderstorms. One lightning strike hits a tree, or a dead tree, or a fern, boom, big forest fire. So it's a really weird time to be alive. Yes, fascinating. So that's pretty much coming together now, the dragonfly habitat area. Just put the railings in there so the guests don't go off and wander into the bushes. And we'll just fill in these gaps here with a few more trees and bushes, just so it doesn't look too barren. A few horsetails there, smoothing it down the edges. Lovely. So cool. Some more ferns as well. Lovely. And we'll get down to the business very soon of making the habitat for the flora, the giant centipede. Oh, and we'll put a bench in here as well, so the guests can just sit down and relax. Maybe a dragonfly lands on their head. You get that sometimes, don't you, when you go into a butterfly enclosure? The butterfly lands on you if you're wearing some bright clothing or something like that. So this is going to be the cave system over here for the flora, and I'm going to use darker rocks in here because this is inside the cave, so there won't be moss growing on these rocks. It's going to be very dark inside. Lovely. And we're just going to curve it round here, and then we'll have, bring the path in, and we'll have a nice little glass section to separate you from the bugs, because I wouldn't want to risk it with this guy, even though he could be harmless. If it did decide to bite, if a kid comes over and starts annoying him, or oh, look at the flora, and then next minute it it could chop someone's finger off or something, or really give a nasty bite. So we're going to make sure that the guests are safe, and the Arthropleura is safe as well, behind this lovely glass panelling. And we'll have to make sure that the panelling goes up higher as well. Later on I do put some glass above the glass fencing there. I'm just getting the Arthropleura in now to give me an idea of how big he actually is, just so I know how big I need to make the cave and the exhibit. But the cave isn't going to be the only section for him. He will get some an outdoor enclosure, so you can see where I put that cave in there to the right. That's where his exit is to go out into his outdoor enclosure, and the guests can go out. Another section in a minute I'm going to build in where the guests can walk out the cave and they can see them outside. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to build a tunnel, a glass tunnel, very much like the ones that you see in aquariums, where you walk through the aquarium and above you the fish and everything are swimming about, but except for this time you're going to be in a forest, and it's for the Arthropleura so you can creep over the glass panelling and you can get a good view of them. So we've just got to make these rocks go down so you can actually climb down to the outdoor section for him. Lovely. So yes, put a few rocks in there so it looks like, and a few more plants, a few red ones to add a bit of colour. Lovely. And we'll put the roof on of the cave a little bit later on. That's the hardest part, trying to, because it's very difficult putting the roof on for the caves, because it's trying to get the camera angles right and making sure when you built it later on you look through and you're trying to see if there's any gaps or if there's anywhere you've missed. But I'm quite happy with how it turns out in the end. Oh, and here's the tunnelling I'm just trying to get to the hang of. So yeah, just put them together and then just try and connect them. Lovely. So the guests are safe behind the glass, just in case he is dangerous, you never know. If you look at some modern centipedes today, in fact the largest centipede today, the Amazonian giant centipede, this animal is incredibly venomous, so you never know. The bite of Arthropleura might not just be dangerous because it's got very large pincers, but it could, in fact, they could have venom in. And these creatures that are alive today, they hunt bats. So you can just, that's quite impressive. They're not hunting small bugs, they're hunting bats. But they are very large. They're 30 centimeters long, which is pretty big. And you can just imagine them living in the cave, just like these ones here, hunting bats. There wouldn't have been bats around then, but I imagine Arthropleura, they could be a predator. And if the ones that are alive today are hunting bats, which are probably larger than they are, they might not. They might view a human being as a snack. So maybe it's best that we keep them enclosed and not with the guests, not mixing them like we are with the dragonflies. I don't imagine the dragonflies would go for a human. I mean, they could, maybe they would give a bite, but I think they'd be viewing bugs and things like that to attack. Like a human being just seems a bit too large for the dragonflies, whereas the Arthropleura, it's bigger than a human, isn't it? Let's get the measurements up of this incredible animal. So 2.6 meters is the length of this creature, which is absolutely huge. Considering that a human being is about 1.6 to 1.7 meters tall on average, this animal is very large. Some crocodiles, in fact I was looking at crocodiles lengths, and it said female crocodiles on average are between 2.6 meters to 3 point something meters, but so some small crocodiles are about the same size as this animal. And when you think it's a bug, you know, it's not a reptile, it's a bug, and it's that big because the habitat that it's got to live in here, the oxygen levels, the humidity, the heat, everything it's just a perfect place for a bug to live. So yeah, this would be hell on earth for some people, going back to this time period, if you don't like bugs, because it wasn't just Flora and giant dragonflies. No, it was giant scorpions that I think were about 1 meter long, and they would have had a sting on the tail, so you could have Flora that have their venomous bite possibly, and then you've got the sting of the scorpion to look out for. And probably the worst one that most people would not want to bump into is the giant spider. If you've seen it in some documentaries, you may have seen Walking with Monsters it was in, and also Prehistoric Park as well. That giant spider is huge, about the size of a human head, and you can see fossils of them in some museums. You can see the legs and the body shape just stuck in the rock, fossilized, and that does give you a sense of how big it really is when you see it in a museum. Yeah, you wouldn't want to bump into that animal, especially if you have arachnophobia. Yeah, ugh, not very nice. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little hole to let a little bit of light coming in, just to add a bit of ambiance, you know, a bit of just the light shining through the cave here. And this is where a few plants will grow because they get a bit of light in this section. So I'm just going to put that in there now. So it's not completely pitch black in here. Lovely, a few red plants as well, and I'm just going to make the rocks have a bit of moss here because they would be getting a bit of sunlight. So yeah, lovely. So who knows, maybe in the future in this game these bugs may be actually put in not just as statues but as actual animals. That would be really interesting, but they probably would have very different animation to that of the dinosaurs and the mammals that are already in this game. Because if you think bugs, the insects, the dragonflies, they would be able to fly, and there's no flying animals in this game yet, so they would have to work on the animation of that. And plus the Flora, they'd probably be able to crawl over things and climb up things, and yeah, so we'd have to have a few different, the animation might be a bit more difficult. So, but they have put the statues in, so it's quite possible that in the future we will have some Carboniferous giant bugs, maybe even some amphibians, who knows. But they are releasing some new creatures soon. They've released some skins. I'm not sure what they are. I think one, I'm pretty confident that it's a velociraptor. The feathers on it look very, I don't know, just the style of it makes me think it's a velociraptor. Plus they said it's been very famous in pop culture. But they said obviously it's going to be more accurate to the actual animal, because the animals in this game are very, very accurate. So I'm looking forward to finding out what they are. I hope it is a velociraptor, because I can't wait to make an exhibit for one of those. A pack of velociraptors living in the Mongolian desert. That would be a really, I can't wait to see it. And but the other ones, I have no idea what they are. I can't tell what they are at all. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, who knows what else is going to come in to this game. I'd love some bugs to come in. It'd be great to let the bugs run free around this bug house and settle into their enclosure. But for now, we'll just have to just deal with these beautiful models that they give us. So here, what I'm doing is just putting some glass panels on top of the fencing that I've put in, just to fit up to the roof, because they probably will be able to climb over that glass and possibly attack the guests. So we're just going to put those in now and just stretch the glass to make sure that it all fits in. We don't want any gaps, because if these animals bred and they laid eggs, the babies might be very small to begin with, and we wouldn't want those sneaking out. And then one day it just grows very large and we like, how has that got there? We don't want that. So now I'm just going to put this dome over, just get a feel for where it's going, and then I'll have to delete a lot of the segment that goes inside the cave. We're just going to put some rocks up on top here, just to make it blend in a bit, because at the moment the top looks very messy. So what I need to do is put some moss rocks in, make it look like it's a proper cliff. The inside I'm happy with now, it's the top that needs to just feel like it just doesn't look natural at the moment. So I need to just blend that in. Wonderful. So this time period, the Carboniferous period, why is it called that? Well, the reason it's called that is because all of these plants that are producing this oxygen, you might think, why is it not called the oxygen period? Well, it's because all these plants are basically soaking up all of the carbon dioxide in the air, and they're trapping it in their bodies made up of carbon, and then they're producing tons of oxygen, which make all the bugs grow enormous. But when these forests died, and that's why when you look in these layers in the ground, you've got different layers, segments of layers throughout time. When you look at this layer, it is full of all the rotting vegetation that has been compressed and turned into coal. And that coal, and also peat as well, peat that they get in the bogs and burn as turf, all of that coal and turf and peat is now used as fuel to burn for energy. So it's amazing that all this vegetation that has been compressed and buried for millions of years is now the fossil fuels that we burn today. So that's why it's called the Carboniferous period. So there you go. Even though the oxygen levels at this time were through the roof, it's called the Carboniferous period because of that. And just tidy up here the tube going into the exhibit. So there you go. Lovely. And also at this time, reptiles were just starting to come about. The very first reptiles, things like little lizards and creatures like that. And what gave them the edge was because they did not have to lay their eggs in water like the amphibians do. So now that they've evolved, they can go out onto dry land. They're not tied or stuck to the water like frogs and salamanders and newts and things like that. They have to stay near water, and they have to lay their eggs in the water because their bodies can't hold water within them. They have to absorb it through the water that they live in. So the reptiles now can venture off, and their scales are much more hardy as well. They can go off and wander inland, and later on, of course, we get a massive jump in the evolution where we get the dinosaurs appearing. It really is amazing how the timeline of evolution has gone, and what time periods have come and gone before. And there's a bit of grass coming up there through the path, so I've just gone over it with a bit of mud to get rid of it. And then we're just going to put some signs in here for the guests to have a little bit of a read of these giant creepy crawlies that once ruled our planet. And we're going to finish off with a few ferns and bushes just to really immerse you in this forest here. Lovely stuff. So, I hope you're all looking forward to Prehistoric Planet 2. I know I am. I'm very excited for it. Something to look forward to at the end of this month. Another 5 nights. It's going to be 5 different episodes. So it's going to be really fun. Can't wait for that. Yes, I've seen some of the clips that have got me thinking from the trailer. The ones that stood out to me the most was the Triceratops. I couldn't believe how big the horns were on that Triceratops. They were massive. And I thought, why are they so big? And then it's got me thinking, just a theory, I don't know if this is correct, but when we're looking at Triceratops skeletons, all we're looking at is the bone. So maybe those bones on top of the bone was possibly like a sheath or something like that, protecting it from the elements. Something like what our fingernails are made out of, maybe possibly covering the bone to protect it. Possibly. But yeah, they were huge. They were very, very big. I was looking at it, I had to pause it just to look at that section where the Triceratops was walking past, and then we've got them also fighting as well, which is really cool. So I can't wait to see that scene. And you can see there I've just put in a bit of water for the Flora to get a drink. In case he's thirsty in the night, he'll have to come and wander out of the cave and get a drink. I wasn't going to put any water in this section at first, and I thought, hang on a minute, he needs to get some water if he needs something to drink. And you can see there I'm just using the decorational plant section with all those trees together and just putting it below the ground so you can't see the actual fencing around it. Just so if you don't want to put one tree in individually, if you want a big section grouped of plants, you can just do that. Makes it a little bit easier. I think we've got plenty of ferns in for this animal. So if he is a vegetarian, he's got plenty of vegetation to eat off. But if he is a predator, I think we'll have to put some live food in for them. Something like very large cockroaches or something that lived back in this time. And maybe some flying creatures for the dragonflies to hunt. Oh, so we're back in the dragonfly enclosure now. Just going to finish it off with a few plants around the edges here. Again, immerse you in this habitat. Wonderful. Oh, and the other scene that stood out to me from Prehistoric Planet was the T-Rex and the dead sauropod on the beach that it was about to feast on, and then it was interrupted by, it looked like some Quetzalcoatlus, and I thought, surely not. It looks like this animal is actually challenging the T-Rex. Oh, and there you can see I had that bridge. That's where I was going to have it. I was going to have it loop round, but I thought, actually, no. I think it suits better this way. Yeah, but I don't know about that. I don't know if a Quetzalcoatlus could challenge a T-Rex. I know there was 2 of them, and I suppose their beaks are very, they could stab the Tyrannosaur, but I don't know, T-Rex, its bite force, I'm not sure about whether a Quetzalcoatlus would even bother to challenge it, but we'll have to see what happens. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a fight between the Quetz and the Tyrannosaurus. Who knows? That would be very interesting to see. And I'm just going to pop another dead tree in here for the dragonflies to land on. That's where they tend to mate. Dragonflies today anyway, they tend to mate on... Oh, I'm just putting the dragonflies in now. Here we go. Yes, they tend to mate on like reeds, bulrushes and things like that near the water. Put a few on the lily pads there. Put one on the dead tree. And they're finishing it off now, making this a bit, just look, it looks so much better now that they're just in there, flying around. Put one on the rock, put another on the tree. Lovely. Beautiful. So, would you step inside this enclosure, or would you rather view it from the outside? Maybe I should put some paths so you can just look through the glass instead. Or would you dare go inside with these giant dragonflies? Let me know if you'd go inside. Or would you be outside going, no, I'm not going in there? I know I'd probably think twice if I was going in and there was the giant spider in there. I'd be thinking of maybe just looking from the outside. I'd probably miss that bit out. We'd probably have to get some warning signs saying, arachnophobics, beware, do not enter, go no further. We don't want people having panic attacks if they come around the corner and there's a big spider just stuck on the glass. So yeah, what I'm doing here now is I'm just putting in some rope to stop the dragonflies from flying into the cave. You see this sometimes in zoos, or like things like bat caves, or even butterfly enclosures, stuff like that. They put in some rope or some plastic strips, and the guests can just push those to the side and walk through. In theory, the dragonflies should not get through. I imagine there might be the odd occasion where one does. We probably have to send in a zookeeper to go down the tunnel with a big net and catch them. God, I can just imagine the guests screaming as the as the dragonflies flying around in the tube. But yeah, we're just doing the section now for the exit. The tubes weren't fitting with the exit, so what I've done is I've just put in a nice little archway of a cave, so it fits a bit better, and just now connecting those points a bit better here, and you just got to make sure there's no gaps and that it all connects nicely. So I'm just, took me a bit of time, and eventually I get it, and then you've got to make sure that the path fits as well. So yeah, that's looking rather nice. I'm quite happy with this now. So we'll just finish off with a few plants on top of these rocks here, blend it in, and all we've got to do really now is do the top of the cave, put in some moss rocks and make it look more natural at the top there, because it just looks all lumpy and bumpy, not natural. So we're going to put some rocks in now. The main thing you've got to make sure is that you don't the rocks don't overlap inside the cave, so I keep going back in to check that none of them are sticking out or blocking the guest's path of walking through. So you've just got to make sure that you make it thick enough. The rocks that you've already put in, you've got to make sure they're thick enough so that the ones that do overlap, they don't come right through. And you can see I'm just checking the ceiling there, making sure none are coming through. There's a few beams there that I just had to delete. But yeah, this is pretty much, it's getting there now. It's almost complete. All I've got to do is put a few trees on this now to make it look more natural instead of just a barren rocks. So a few trees on top of there, and I'm going to use, I think this is my favourite tree now, the swamp tree. It just, there's something about it, the roots at the bottom of it, the vines and the branches, the way they fan out, it just looks really prehistoric, and I just love the style of that type of tree. So here I'm just finishing off the rocks, and then we'll get the trees in. You can see I'm just checking everything fits okay there. So yeah, so it's nearly done. We're nearly there. So what I'll do, guys, is I'll do what I normally do. Tomorrow will be the bug house tour, so you get to see it a bit more in detail, more of what the guests would get to see. We'll walk around and show everything. That video will be coming out tomorrow, but if you're watching this, if you're not watching this as it's coming out, I'll leave a link at the end of the video that will take you to that bug house tour. I'm just putting some vines in here through the hole that are dangling through the hole in the cave. Lovely. So yeah, we're pretty much coming to the end. So if you like the video, guys, please leave a comment or a like down below, and please subscribe for more content like this if you enjoy it. Oh, and here we're putting in the trees to just blend in this section. Lovely. My favourite tree, the swamp tree. And a few jungle trees as well, I think, just to add a bit of variety. Wonderful. And a nice big one in the centre there. Wonderful. Great. So that bit's done. All we've got to do now is the entrance and the exit, smoothing that path in as well. And all I'm going to do here is just put a bit of vegetation down. Not that much. Just a nice bit of vegetation and a few trees here, just to make it look a bit more inviting into the bug house rather than just being bland and nothing there. So, and we'll put a bit of fencing around as well so the guests don't wander and trample over all the lovely plants. And we'll put a sign in to just let them know what they're going into, the bug house. If you're afraid of creepy crawlies, do not enter. And a few more on this side as well. So that's pretty much it, guys. We are coming to the end now. So thank you all very much for watching. I've seen a lot of you have got great ideas for certain habitats you want to see. Those are in the process, so if you've got any more, please leave them down below. And if you'd like a closer look at this habitat, you can see the full tour on the screen now. So thank you once again very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.